Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 12th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is the ESPN reporter for the Washington Commanders and the host of the John Keim Report. Let me welcome John Keim to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get right into it. I just wanted to start by asking how you got so into broadcasting to begin with.
So when I was your age and a little bit older, I was very much all I liked to do was play sports, right? So I love being around sports. There was, I had a couple older brothers and one younger brother and a dad who all raced to the door in the morning to get the sports page. So I wanted to stay involved in sports after I knew my playing days, which ended when I was a senior. When I went to college, my playing days were over. So I wanted to stay involved in it, and you can do a couple ways, right? And it's either and I went into journalism. I had an older brother who did that at Ohio State, went to Ohio State and wrote for the newspaper, school paper, et cetera. And that's how I got into it. But it really starts with the love of sports and then just a love of the sports page. And then it kind of goes from there. And then eventually you wind your way to ESPN. And obviously I do a lot more of everything. You write, you go on TV, radio, podcasting. So do a little bit of everything, but it really started with the love of sports. And then, just again, the race to the sports page every morning. But people who can't understand that now, because it's all on your phone. Back in the day, it's at your doorstep and somebody might have the other sports section for a half hour before you get to it. It was painful.
Now, of course, you mentioned how you write, you do podcasts, radio, all of that. Can you kind of explain why it's so important to have versatility in your work?
Sure. I think that's a good question. It's funny because when I started, I always tell people, like when I started, I'd go to a game and in my backpack, or at that time, just a bag, whatever, you'd have a computer, a notepad, and that's about it. And now it's a computer, notepad, it's a hairbrush, might be, it's equipment to go on TV if necessary. It's, a microphone for the podcast. And it's important. Like, listen, I would always say for any business, the more you can do, the better, but especially for the news business. If you have multiple skills that you can highlight to someone else, you have a much better chance of climbing a ladder, right? And finding your niche in this business. And because you never know, here's the other thing in this business, as people can see, newspapers are going away or at least fading, right? And so how are you going to survive in the news business? Well, you can survive by being able to do multiple things. If something happened to me with ESPN, I still have my podcast. Now, you may not make the same money with that, but it gives you another outlet to help yourself and transition to something else perhaps. But it's also, for a place like ours, you have to be well-versed and you have to be good on TV. It helps to be good on radio, right? So the more you can do, the better off you always are.
Yeah, and I would say it's a lot like a 5-tool player in baseball.
Correct.
In a way, you have to be able to field, bat, do everything like that. Now, moving on, a similar question to the first question I had. When did you decide that you wanted to start your podcast, The Josh Keim Report?
So that was 5 years ago or so. In 2019, I've been going on podcasts locally with like JP Finley, Mitch Tischler, guys who have covered the team, but they had a podcast through, at that time, Comcast Sports. And I like going on theirs. I didn't think about starting my own because, I didn't know, can you host a show, right? And I think I was always a good guest, but could I host it? And Bram Weinstein, who is now the voice of the Commanders, approached me with an idea. I was like, you should do this. I'm going to start this company. I want you to do this. I want you to do this here. Consider it. So it took me a while. It took him a few times to convince me to do it, partly because, again, I like going on other shows. And then I kind of decided, well, what people like is when I'm on there is information I have, right? Because of my proximity to the team, I can still share that information on a podcast. I don't have to be a radio host, co-host. You have to know how to do things with that, but you don't have to be the same thing. What I need to do is provide the information to the people that I would give on a radio show. So I basically what is it that I would talk about in the radio? Well, that's what I'll talk about here. And then my other skill is interviewing. I think I can do, that's something I've prided myself on. Well, I can bring them on too. So after a while, Matthew, I started thinking like, okay, maybe this isn't a bad idea. Let's try it. And also the funny thing is at that time, I was kind of looking for ways to expand myself, and just to try something a little bit different and it enhance your game, so to speak. Just like you said, 5 to a player. Hey, you know what? My left hand isn't good enough in basketball. I've got to work on my left hand this offseason, things like that. So that's partly what it was too, that I decided, okay, I was looking at like, should I take some improv classes just for fun, right? Do something for fun or that you might do. So that's what led me down that. But it really started with Bram kind of bugging me a little bit about it. And I'm glad he did, because I've enjoyed it. And I do enjoy a lot about it, which is the talking and interviewing people, and also researching and watching things. And the hardest part about being a writer is the actual writing. This is like being a writer without having to write. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, now moving over to the actual, Commanders talk. First things first, when talking about the Commanders, I do think we need to address the performance from Austin Seibert in week 2. A little background for the people that aren't as familiar with the situation. Over the offseason, the Commanders experimented with many different kickers, but none of them ended up working out. Less than a week before their game against the Giants, they signed Austin Seibert, who ended up setting the franchise record with 7 made field goals, including a game winner. With that being said, what was it like being able to watch a new member of the team take charge and secure the first victory of the season for Washington?
Well, because I've covered this team a while, I kept waiting for a disaster of a kick at some point, because that's just what they're like, that's what always happens here. And even though the fortunate thing for him, for his first game, they were mostly short kicks. So 6 of them were closer than an extra point would be. So you've got to make those. But when you're kicking 6 of them, the chances of something going wrong at some point or just a mishit, whatever, it's going to happen, because like they're human, right? So I think it was a good job of him, but I also think it speaks to, so during the week I was talking to Tress Way, who is their punter, but also their holder. And I asked him about adjusting to all these new kickers, because he's adjusting to a new guy every couple of weeks. So that Seibert was the 5th guy they've had in since March. And so the one thing that Tress said that helps him adjust is the long snapper, Tyler Ott. The consistency of his snaps. That's going to help Tressway. It's going to help Seibert get used to it right away. So I think for a first-time operation, and Tress is one of the best holders in the league. So Seibert got placed into a very good situation for him, and he capitalized. So that was, but you don't see it like that. And also, you don't typically want to see games with a guy kicking 7 field goals, because it usually means there aren't touchdowns, right? So, but he took advantage of an opportunity, and that game will keep him here for a little bit.
Yeah, so of course, when the Commanders originally got Kade York, they sent away the conditional 7th-round pick, and that's what they ended up getting back when they released him. Do you think they would have released him if it weren't for that conditional 7th-round pick? Because after all, the 2 kicks that he missed were from 47 and 56 yards, which are not easy by any means.
No, they're not. He does have a good leg, though, and I think for him, those are the kicks he has to make. His big problem when he was in Cleveland, too, was missing kicks inside the 40. That's where, and I know this because my family is from there, and my middle son is a big Browns fan, and I'd hear every week about Kade York's misses. So, but the long kicks he was pretty good at. So that's supposed to be his strength. And he just wasn't consistent enough. And that spoke to also his career. So yeah, I do think though that if you're on the fence about somebody after 1 week and you're like, yeah, let's keep that draft pick because somebody else is out there who can give us the same thing, then you go get that guy. So, I think with York, it was just a continuation of the issues that he's had in his career, which is the inconsistency. So maybe I can't say, Matthew, that they wouldn't have released him. That I think that has to play a factor in it. But we're only talking about a 7th-round pick. If you think the guy like, yeah, I know he missed that. And here's the other thing. If you look and say, you know what, that was a bad snap. you know what I mean, or a bad hold, whatever. If you can look at the operation and say it, then you're willing to continue and seed that pick. But when you feel like the operation is really good and this guy's is an inconsistency, then you're gone. So yeah, but I think they kind of came in knowing that it was going to be a short leash for him, and that's what it turned out to be.
Yeah, now, of course, throughout 2 games, I think it's safe to say that the Commanders' defense has been quite underwhelming, whether it's missed tackles, blown coverages. This defense has just definitely it has to step up at some point. What changes do you think need to be made in order for that to happen?
So I think, well, the changes you brought up, one, you got to tackle better. That's not a personnel change. That's just a physical change. So against the Giants, like Malik Neighbors had a really good game, but they're in position to hold them to like 10 catches for 70 yards. If you just make 2 tackles that are right there. So like those 2-1s, those little, hitch routes where Mike Davis misses them, you make those tackles, it's different, right? Things look different. And there was the one he was beaten on a crossing route. He bumps into the linebacker. So that could have been a short game too. Point is, like, make the basic plays to help yourself. And so that's one thing. And I think too, like the run game, the run defense has to be better. And I think sometimes when you're watching it, and it's funny, I've talked to enough people who say this, but run defense is the run game is about the math. If you're looking at a side of the ball where there's 6 blockers against 4 guys, math wins, right? 9 times out of 10, the math is going to win there. So your 6 guys are going to block. That's happening too often here. And you're seeing the defensive tackles get doubled a lot, which tells you that something else has gone. So whether it's how you're slanting them at times, maybe you can do some movement things up front to do it, or do you bring another safety into the box? And that, like, the danger there is now there's a threat of giving up big plays over the top. They can't have that. I think they'll live with getting hurt on the ground to prevent those big plays in the pass game. So I think there are ways you can definitely get better. Like I said, the math part is a scheme thing. So can you solve that? How can you solve that in these situations? Do you call something different? And then I think it's, guys like Payne and Allen, when they get their one-on-one opportunities, they didn't get a lot of those last game, but when they get them, you have to capitalize. And I think there's some things, Matthew, that they're still getting used to with this new defense. And sometimes you see guys maybe trying to make a play upfield, but by doing so, you're in this gap, and now you're getting moved out. So you're kind of in the same gap, but somebody over here is getting moved out too, and now the gap's like that. And there were a couple of times that was like that the other day where guys were kind of doing the right thing, but just a little bit off, too much here and too much there. And then the safety's got to come up and fill a gap that instead of being 2 to 3 yards wide is now almost 4 yards wide. That's asking a lot. So I think there's some fundamental things you can get better with. I think there's some scheme things you can get better with. And then I think the last part is that they can't do right now is talent. I think you're going to have to upgrade at certain positions like corner in the offseason, and that's going to be you can't do that right now. They're just the answer that they need at corner is not there right now. And so that's going to be an off-season thing, but for right now, it's about some of those other factors, at least, because it's not going to make you a top 10 defense by any means, but it'll make you a better defense than what they've shown. They have to be better.
Yeah, and now talking about that secondary, the Commanders' secondary has already struggled to contain receivers, including Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Malik Neighbors. What are they going to have to do to limit Jamar Chase heading into this upcoming matchup?
It's Jamar Chase, and then it's Marvin Harrison Jr. So they have a tough road coming up. So, like I said, with Neighbors, the one thing that surprised me initially is that they put Mike Davis on him. Mike Davis did not look great in training camp. So I was a little bit surprised there. And in the second half, I thought they did a much better job on him, except for one play where he runs a crosser where he's open on that. Otherwise, they did a good job on him. Noah Igbenogany and then Benjamin St-Juste, I thought, played him much better than what Davis did in the first half. That said, we saw what Mike Evans can do. Mike Evans is a Hall of Fame guy, and there were times St-Juste was on him where it's good coverage and he still gets it. So I think you're going to have to limit the big plays for him. And then, to be honest, you have to hope that T. Higgins doesn't play for Cincinnati Monday night, because if he does, now Chase is more dangerous. Chase only has 10 catches for 97 yards in 2 games, but he's played 2 outs. Like, the Patriots have a really good defense, and Kansas City has a really smart defensive staff. So just because they've held him, I'm not anticipating that these guys are going to do the same. So what they have to hope is that he may get his, but you got to limit it, right? So, I think you're going to have to play. You're going to definitely have to give him safety help, whoever's on him. If they're leaving him one-on-one, if I'm Joe Burrow, the minute I see that, that's where I'm going, because, and so that's the conundrum with going back to the run game. I'm going to want to try and have safeties back there to make sure that you've got that guy covered. Don't let someone else beat you in the pass game other than Chase, but easier said than done.
You mentioned sometimes in week 1 where St. Juice had good coverage and still wasn't able to make the play. When you said that, my mind immediately went to that Mike Evans first touchdown,
Right.
where St. Juice was, of course, physical off the line. Can you kind of describe that play a little more in detail?
Sure. So that was just a basic fade to the end zone. So on that play, you're right. He's got him at the line and he's with them, right? So the one mistake, St. Juice plays that well. The one mistake where he could have played it better and was looking back for the ball. And then the question is, when do you do that? So by the time you're at the goal line, that ball's almost there. You can't look back then because you're going to lose sight of things. It's turning too fast. He could have read the hands and getting his hand up inside Evans to maybe knock it away. The other thing is where he really said, because I talked to him about this too, around the 10-yard line where at that point he's going to the end zone. As a cornerback, he's going to go there, and that's what you're trying to protect. If he runs a stop route there, okay, I give that up to protect the touchdown. But you want to protect the touchdown. So at that point at the 10-yard line, now you turn back. If he does that, he has a chance to make a better play on the ball at the goal line, right? So, but it was good coverage. Now, he had another touchdown where Evans just beat him again. I mean, Evans, again, is really good. I think St. Juice competes. He's not at that level to do that, right? I think he can be a solid number 2 corner for somebody, but he's being asked to play at a high level number 1 here because they just don't have anybody else to do that. But yes, that was a play where, it was just a really good job, really good throw by Baker Mayfield to a really good receiver against very good coverage, but to finish it, to make that next step, that's what St. Juice could have done, look back around the 10.
And then, of course, Hall of Fame receiver. Then you also have to consider Mike Evans, 6'5", one of the bigger wide receivers in football. But moving over to the offensive side, of course, we have to discuss Jaden Daniels. He's yet to pass for a touchdown, but he's obviously been extremely effective running the ball. He did much better week 2 passing than I would say he did week 1, and he still has 0 turnovers. What's your initial reaction on the rookie quarterback?
So I don't think he looks like a rookie quarterback. There are some times where he looks like a young quarterback in terms of plays that you see, okay, as he gets more experience, he'll make this play, and this play. I think the poise he plays with is really good. And that's where, you don't see him I wouldn't say you not see him confused, because I do think sometimes they're going to get you, right? That's just the nature of playing that position, especially as a young quarterback. But I don't think he looks flustered at all when he's in that situation. And so I really like that. I like how he's handled himself in terms of the work he puts in. It's not just, it's not about posting videos on Instagram of you pulling tires around your waist. He gets there early, gets his work in, and he's prepared. So I think those things bode well for the long term. So right now, where you see it right now is sometimes there are some plays where you see, okay, you probably predetermined your read here. And because you did that, maybe you're looking away from a play that actually is available to you, that in a year or two, maybe you automatically know, stay with this because they might change. Like Tampa Bay, there was one play where Terry McLaurin would have been open down the seam a couple plays after they missed on that long pass. Well, in practice, and what the Bucs had shown prior to that was the way the safety played would take Terry out of the play. But at the snap, the safety cheats way over to the outside, leaving that seam ball open. Now, Jaden looks there, but he goes somewhere else. I think he ends up running on the play. So he ends up getting 11, 12, 14 yards. Good job, but it could have been a long game. But the point of it is, as he gets more experience, I think maybe you hang there just a titch longer to see how does the safety react. Don't assume he's going to react like this because this is the pre-snap look. See how he does, then maybe attack it. And if not, you get off. So like that's a growth and experience thing. I think you still see that. And then the other part of that, Matthew, is keeping your eyes up when you're a scrambler. And especially when teams are playing zone, defense's eyes are on you. So it's harder to then break off those long runs because they're looking right at you. And whereas opposed to Bucks and man, their backs are to you half the time, right? So you have, that's all that's conducive to a quarterback running for more yards. So I think that's one where they want him to keep the ball alive a little bit more. And he's had some opportunities the first 2 games. If he does that, you can make more big plays. And I think why they're excited is because what they see while he's still learning to do more. That to me, for them, is the exciting part. So you see, like what I also like is the patience. The Giants force you to be very patient. And he could have forced the ball a couple of times last week, and he didn't. Like, why don't they throw it down the field? Well, because it's not there. The Giants are taking that away. So are you willing? Like they're going to see, like, can you be patient or not? And he was. And I think in the red zone too, you see that what he doesn't do is force the ball, and he takes care of the ball. So I think that's a mature part of his game. So there's a lot to like just through 2 games. And, and there's a lot to like, and there's a lot that there's still more he can do, which to me is like, if you're a Washington fan, you should feel pretty good about that because I think he's going to get there.
Yeah, now you mentioned Terry McLaurin. I did want to talk about him a bit. Of course, he's coming off 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, but has struggled so far to begin this year. In his first 2 games, he's amassed a total of just 8 receptions for 39 yards, which is definitely less productive than what you would expect from a guy like him. Would you say that there's anyone to blame for that lack of productivity, or is it just getting used to a new system with a new quarterback?
I think it's getting used to the quarterback, but also, so there were a couple of times last week where the Giants just took him out of the play. And you can, what defensive coaches will always tell you, if you want to take an outside receiver out of the play or out of the game, you can do that because that's just rolling some coverages to him, letting some other guys beat you. And I think that's what they're going to do. So if you notice, a lot of the times they're getting to him. The reason why it's so few yards on 8 catches, because there are a lot of passes at the line of scrimmage or slants or whatever. So they're trying to find ways to get him the ball. Now, against the Bucks, again, I told you the one play, that could have been a 30 to 40-yard game. That's an advanced thing for Jaden Daniels. Now, I don't expect that to happen like right now. That's something as they advance, it'll get there. And then they missed the 70-yard touchdown throw, right? So you complete that ball, and now things look a little bit different with his yardage total, right? So that's one where that's an opportunity there. But yes, I think the way the Giants played, I think they did a good job of taking him away down the field as an option. So one thing I would say, like in training camp, I felt like they were developing a good connection. And I think where you say, the other one is too. So this is another play against the Bucks. If you remember, there was they lined up McLaurin in the slot and they ran like that little slot fade down the left side. So on that play, where Daniels will get to is there's 2 things on that play. One, Zach Ertz is wide open over the middle for 20 yards. 2, if you're going to throw that ball, the receiver and the quarterback need to be on that same page. Like, where is the defensive back in relation to the receiver? And on that play, the defensive back is about a half step ahead of Terry. If he's even, I can throw it down there, right? But he's not. So on that play, the back shoulder fade would have been the option. As they progress, I think that's what you'll see because we saw that in training camp. He threw that pass, a similar situation, or not a similar route. He threw that back shoulder, and McLaurin went crazy in the end zone after that because it was the back shoulder. That's a next level in the relationship kind of situation. That's what Aaron Rodgers did in Green Bay for all those years with Devontae Adams. That's what that's what they have to get to. So there are opportunities that are there as they progress for more plays to be made. And, I think I'm not like that one is far from, I like what if there were issues this summer, like we saw with Jahan Dotson who was here, he didn't do anything. He wasn't doing anything. So what he's doing now for the Eagles, what he would have done here is about what he showed in summer. McLaurin was doing things with him. So I think they'll get there. It's just a matter of, at what point, and then how, the Bucs game was the one, because the way they played their coverages, it was more conducive to McLaurin having some big plays. And again, I gave you 3 where there were potential there. They just it's not even the same page. It's just like, okay, as you advance more, you're going to read this way, and now you can get to them, right? And the deep one was just a miss. Like that happens. Like that's, if they get it again, I put my money on them connecting on it. So, I think McLaurin will get there at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know it's a small sample size, but has there been anyone that's really impressed you or stood out to you so far after these 2 games?
Well, the 3 that have really stood out, I think what they've done in the run game with Brian Robinson, I really like Brian Robinson. I think, you saw some, like he ran angry last week, and I think he ran with pretty good vision. And then I think the other 2, that's a good development for them, because I think like the Bengals do not defend the run well right now. That's a good thing. So if I'm Washington, that's where I'm going to hammer that. And then the combo of Eckler and Ertz, that's one where in the summertime, again, I go back, because sometimes you see things in training camp and you're like, well, is this going to play out this way? I'm seeing this. What is it real? Right. And in their cases, they both look pretty good, and they're both looking pretty good so far. So I think that's a positive development. Now, they don't have that dynamic guy. Like Terry can be a very good receiver. He's not, not many teams have a Justin Jefferson or a Tyreek Hill as far as just that explosiveness, but they can be better with it. But those 2, Ertz and Eckler, are good options for a young quarterback. And that's why they got him. And they're doing exactly what they hope for. So I think those 2 would be certainly on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we talked about Jamar Chase a little bit earlier, how the defense is going to have to adjust to him. And now, just overall against Cincinnati, next Sunday, Commanders will travel to Cincinnati to face off against the Bengals. Despite the Bengals starting off their season 0-2, of course, they are still the favorites by a good margin. What do you predict the score will be heading into that contest?
Oh boy, the score. I haven't thought about that too much. However, so here's what I'd say. They're playing a wounded team at home on a Monday night. That's a tough task. So it'd be hard not to like the Bengals in this one. But I think Washington will be able to control the ball a little bit. So let's say like maybe it's a 27-21 type game for Cincinnati. The concerns I would have is, again, it's a wounded team at home. Like they're 0-2 and they had higher aspirations, right? This is a tough spot for Washington to be in, with a young, still developing, with a team that's still developing. So, and then it's like, is T. Higgins playing? If he does, I think the Bengals, that's certainly very good for them. Then it's also, can they stop Trey Hendrickson in the pass rush? If they can, I don't think there are a lot of guys in that run defense that are going to, that is just, I think they should be able to run the ball on them. And I think that's, so, I think that's what they have to do. But I just worry with that defense. The defense can get better. Like they're far from a finished product, but I just, at what point do they get there? And is this a tough one to get there too? So that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely going to be a tough one to win, but we'll see what happens.
It's why they play, Matthew. You never know. Like you remember a couple years ago, they're going to Pittsburgh, 11-0 Pittsburgh on a that wacky COVID year, and they come away with an upset win. So and
then just a few, I think it was like 2 years after that, maybe they beat the undefeated Eagles.
Correct. As well. Right. And on the road in a Monday night game, right? So you don't know ever. And that's like this is where I think the fun part for a Washington fan is like, what does Jaden Daniels do in this game? Because, this is a primetime game. Guys like that tend to make huge plays in those games. How does he look? And is that enough? Can he make enough plays with his legs and his arm? And then with the run game, they can pull off an upset. Would it shock me? No. But I think it's a really hard environment that they're going to play in for his first, for not his first road game, but for his first primetime game. So going to be tough. But in this league, like, I think you can look at the first 2 weeks and say, you think you know what's going on in this league, and you really don't, because it changes every week.
Yeah, now throughout your career, you've gotten the opportunity to watch many exciting games, meet many awesome people. What would you say has been your favorite or most memorable moment so far?
Oh, I don't know that I have a most. I think more so than that, what I really enjoy is talking to people who have achieved at a high level and finding out, like, I really enjoy football. So I think when I have memorable moments is almost every day when I get off the phone with someone, I'm like, I just got paid to talk football for a half hour. So like that to me is always memorable. So the moments of games, those are fun, but I enjoy like the sitting in my office talking to people after rewatching the game and talking to coaches and, things like that, like, and learning more about the game and, talking to players about the why of their position. Like, why did you make this play? Like, what did you see to get you there? What led to this decision? Like, I really, really enjoy that. And, there are sometimes, though, I will say, like, there are some times where, and this is more from the NBA standpoint, when I covered the Cavs Wizards playoffs games when LeBron was first with the Cavs, and there were some really fun games and some buzzer beaters. I'm like, this is where it's like, I really like my job, because the atmosphere was awesome, right? And, so that's always fun. But in terms of this, like, I don't know if there's, because the other, I think getting to see and meet high level athletes and coaches, and again, find out their story and what made them into what they are, being around guys like Joe Gibbs, right? Players like Champ Bailey, Santana Moss, guys who are just, who achieved this. Trent Williams, who's going to be a Hall of Famer someday, Darryl Green, like things like that. Is just, that's where I kind of say, like, I've had a really good career because I got a chance to meet a lot of people like that and spend my career talking about football.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do have one final question to ask before we wrap things up. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring broadcaster or journalist like me, what would it be?
Keep working, because you never know what's going to happen. So my wife and I were talking about this recently, and she's in journalism as well. She is an editor with an aviation magazine. And we were talking about people that we were first in the business with, or that we were with in college. And a lot of them whom you thought would go on to have these great careers dropped out to do something else. This is a survivor business. Just keep pushing every day, because, there are certain things like we can talk about, like podcasts and this thing and that thing. Things will evolve, but what doesn't change is what's important in this business. Building relationships is important. Making yourself better is important. And, always, in your case, like, always ask, if you're a reporter, it's, are you putting out good work every day? Focus on putting out good work every day, and the rest will follow. So I think, like, those are kind of general, but I do believe in that. Like, there's everybody's going to have a different journey. My journey was not what I had envisioned initially, but it's worked out. And so I think if you just remember that, but the key is get up and keep pushing, because you just don't know. And you think, sometimes you think, like, does anybody notice what I'm doing? And eventually the answer is yes, they will. If you keep pushing, you keep putting out, I would have some people who would focus on, like, various things about, like, whether it's with a podcast or this or that, and they say, well, I only want to put out a short one because people don't listen to long ones. Like, no, the goal is, it starts with put out a good podcast, put out a good product, focus on that. Just be good every day. Wake up every day, say, I'm going to be good today, and keep pushing, and it will happen. And so I think that would be my advice to anybody. It's what I tell my kids. And, if you just do good work, people will notice.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Well, first of all, just thanks for having me on. You do a really good job. Matthew, I'm happy to come on anytime you ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, big thanks to John Keim for being the 12th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we'll see you next time.